We are in the book of Job, and Kimberly, come on, let me go ahead and give you some notes here. It's good to see you tonight. There you go. We're informal. We want to get that in your hands. And I do remind you that we do have notes, and we post them on Facebook. You can go to our Facebook page. You can go to Campbellsburg Baptist, then go to the groups page, and under the groups page you'll find Midweek Bible Study. Click on that, and then click on the files, and you'll find a copy of the worksheets that we do, the note sheets. You can download for yourself and print out and have them as a help. So we hope that you'll do that, and that will help you. We are in the book of Job, and we've been studying here for a while, but I want to start with a kind of a question, kind of a thought here before we get into it. We're going to talk about this. And there's something that I've talked about several times, I believe in, is perception is reality. And sometimes that trips people up. Perception is reality. What we perceive is what is real. Because what we mean by that is what we perceive affects how we act. If we perceive someone is maybe against us or out to hurt us, we will shy away from them. We will try to protect ourselves. If we perceive someone is trying to cheat us, we'll do different. If we perceive somebody as being good to us, loves us, cares about us, we'll open ourselves up for them. And so that's where the perception meets reality. In Proverbs it says, the sluggard says there's a lion in the streets. And what they meant by that was they believed there was danger, so they wouldn't go to work. They wouldn't get out and do anything because they thought, they wanted to believe that there was trouble out there. So they believed they would say there's a lion in the street, so I'm not going to get out and do what I need to do. That was a perception they wanted to believe, I think, in order to justify their laziness. But perception is reality. And we really could add to that, misperception is reality, because very often we do misperceive things. We think people are out to hurt us when they're not. We think people are bad people when they're not. We think because they're different from us that we don't trust them. We don't want to be around them. But if we'll give them that moment, we'll find they're good people. I've been traveling. I've had a chance here in the last month and a half to go east and west. I've been to London, England, met a lot of people over there, not just from England, but from other places around the world. Recently, I was in Los Angeles, and there were a lot of people there from around the world. Maybe they've lived in Los Angeles a lot of times, but they were from different backgrounds. And just all through that time, people were kind, were helpful, were just got along. And it's so easy to, because they look different, because they do a little different, we can think, well, they're not like me. I don't want anything to do with them. And we rob ourselves because of that misperception. And so we need to be careful about that. We're talking about a lot of this book of Job. That's what we're dealing with here, is perception. As we talk about Job and his three friends, and they deal with what happened to Job, we've been talking about how the friends, and we're going to talk about some more tonight, have told Job that the reason his trouble came is because he was sinning. He was doing sinful things. Their perception of God is that if you're doing wrong, it must, or if God is judging you, if God is doing things, if you're facing trauma in your life, tragedy in your life, it's because you have sinned. Well, we have the whole story here in the book of Job. We were able to take the first chapter of Job, and we have that broad view to where we see that Job's trouble came because of the evil one, because of the devil, because of Satan. And he came and accused Job towards God, and he incited God. He said, Job, you say Job's a great guy, but you take this stuff away, he'll turn his back on you, he'll criticize you. And so God said, go ahead and try. So we know that Job's trouble came from an attack from Satan, the accuser, the deceiver. But Job didn't have that view. Job was just living his life like we go through our life, and his friends didn't have that view. And what we're learning here is they had that perception that that was reality, that if trouble comes your way, it's because you're sinning. And what we're learning here in the Bible, and one of the reasons I'm wondering if God didn't give us this book of Job, is to teach us that there are those two sides of God. Yes, He is a God of judgment. Yes, He is just against sin, and He comes against sin in His time frame. But He is a God of mercy and forgiveness and patience. And that's what this book of Job is really telling us. That He, in chapter 1, we see a God that is talking in glowing terms about Job. Have you noticed my servant Job, a righteous and upright man? God was proud of Job. And we're going to learn more about that as we go on. And God grants mercy. He grants grace. We've all experienced grace. We know the grace of Jesus Christ. We were all condemned to a life of separation from God, but Jesus Christ came to make a way for you to have a relationship. That's grace, that's mercy, that's love. And so this book of Job is showing us these two sides, and it's drawing that out by the perceptions of Job's friends. And so that's why I wanted to start with this, is whatever our perceptions are, that's what is reality to it. It may be a bad perception, maybe a wrong perception, but that's what drives us. So we need to make sure our perception is right about everything, but especially about who God is. There's a lot of people that stay away from God because they have a wrong idea about Him. And so that's why we want to teach the Bible. We want to teach who God is so that they have the right perception and know that He is the good and perfect Father, and every good gift cometh from the Father above, and He is a ready help in time of danger. He's a ready counselor to fall upon when we have something hurting our heart. And so we want that proper reception. So we're picking it up in chapter 15 of Job, and the title of this thing is Discussion Turns into Dispute. We've gone through one cycle of Job and his friends talking over these situations. I'll just do a real brief recap. Again, Job's living his life. He's called one of the greatest men on earth. He is very wealthy. He has a lot of flocks. He has a big family. He has a lot of staff. And God had blessed him tremendously. And God says he is a righteous man. He tried to do right. He tries to live right. Doesn't mean he's a perfect man. A righteous man is not a perfect man. A righteous man or a righteous woman is someone that is striving to live for God. And when they do make a mistake, they immediately repent of it, confess it, and do what is right. So Job was a righteous man trying to serve God in his best ways. But again, Satan wants to test him, wants God to test him. And so first off, he loses everything. He loses all his flocks. He loses his servants. And the last step of that was he lost his 10 children. A great wind came in. The house collapsed, and all 10 of his children, and I guess grandchildren and little ones, were killed. And Job, in one fell swoop, lost all of his children. What a great tragedy that was. But he did not curse God. He said, "The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I am the Lord's," he said. So then Satan comes around another time. And he says, "Well, yeah, no, he didn't do it there. But you afflict his body. You cause him pain on his body. He'll curse you, God." So God said, "Okay." So then Satan afflicted Job with boils all over his body. And if you've had any kind of sore like that, maybe you've had the shingles. That's almost one of the most common things I can think of. And you have them around your waist or maybe on your face. Those things itch and hurt and just make you look terrible, make you feel terrible. You can't sleep. Well, imagine having sores like that all over your body and you can't get any relief. And his friends come and they find Job sitting around the fire in the ashes, taking broken pottery and scraping the scabs off his skin. I can't imagine that at all. And for 7 days they sit with their friend. They sit and they don't say anything. They just commiserate with him. It doesn't tell us if Job said anything, but they sit with him and they don't give him any information, any advice. But then they start talking. And as they start talking, they tell Job, you must have sinned. You must have done something to cause this. And Job defends himself that he has not done that. And he doesn't know why this trouble came. And again, we know why it came, but they don't. And so we went through a series where these three friends advised Job, gave their great wisdom to Job. And all three of them, it basically boiled down to, Job, you had to have sinned to cause this. And Job asserts his innocence. Well, now we're to the second round of these discussions, starting in chapter 15, with Eliphaz. Eliphaz, we believe, was the oldest, and he came up against Job, and he was one of them that just told him. And here Eliphaz tells Job, it jumped over one for me. First off, that he said, Job lacks wisdom, talking to his great friend. So you lack wisdom, and he reminds him that God judges the wicked. So we come into these reasons that Eliphaz gives for why he knows that Job lacks wisdom. And first off, he says that he's listened to Job talk, and as he listened to Job, he just what Job said didn't ring true in his eyes and his perception again. Let's look at 15, starting at verse 1. Then Eliphaz the Temanite replied, would a wise man answer with empty notions, or fill his belly with the hot east wind? You know what he's saying? Job, you're a blowhard. You're full of hot air. That's what he's saying to him. Would he argue with useless words, with speeches that have no value? But you have even undermined piety and hindered devotion to God. Your sin prompts your mouth. You adopt the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, not mine. Your own lips testify against you. So this is Eliphaz's charge against his friend here. And like I said, he's saying, you're just full of hot air. And then he goes on in verse 7. Are you the first man ever born? In other words, are you wiser than ever? Do you know because you were firstborn? Were you brought forth before the hills? Do you listen in on God's counsel? Talking about being one there when God's making decisions. Do you limit wisdom to yourself? Do you think you're the only one who's wise? What do you know that we don't know? What insights do you have that we don't have? The gray-haired and the aged are on our side, men even older than your father. Are God's consolations not enough for you? Words spoken gently to you? Why has your heart carried your way, and why do your eyes flash, so that you vent your rage against God and pour out such words from your mouth? That's what Eliphaz, that's one of his reasons. He said, look, I've listened to you. I've heard you. And he just doesn't believe what Job's telling him. He thinks Job's being hypocritical. He thinks Job is hiding stuff, and he just doesn't think his words. So Eliphaz is judging him on his words. He's seeing where Job's words lead. And Eliphaz, Job's word, told Job that he had a wicked heart. This is Eliphaz's perception of him. And he says, Eliphaz said that Job lacked wisdom. Are you older than the hills? Do you know more than the ancients? Is what Eliphaz. So that's his attack against Job, in this case, lacking wisdom. One of the things we have here that we humans are good about is they've asserted their position. Okay, Job, this is why you've got this trouble. Job, being challenged, defends himself. He says, no, I've not. No, I haven't done those things. So now they don't say, oh, okay, you're right. They don't accept what he says. No, they've got to bolster their argument even more. They've got to prove they're right. Job's not right. And that's what starts driving us sometimes. We quit seeking the truth We want to just establish ourselves as right, and this is what we see going on here. And then he goes on just to repeat what he says, that God judges the wicked. Eliphaz substantiates his position, and he refers back to the ancients. He says, look, I'm following tradition. All the old fathers, all the old people, they take this position that God just punishes sin. And so they're all in agreement with me. Job, you're out here in left field. You're going against common knowledge, common tradition here, is what he's saying. And then he recounts Job's troubles and proofs. If we went on through the chapter, a lot of this next section here is just repeating their arguments over and over again. And I know that's frustrated me. There's sometimes I've been a lot of times calling customer support or something, and there's a problem with my order or something like that, and all they do is just keep repeating policy. And I tell them, I've heard your policy, I know what you're saying, but it's wrong. It's not right. It didn't work out that way. But what do? They just repeat, well, policy is. Well, I don't want to hear that, and Job didn't want to hear it either. So then we get into chapter 16, and Job replies to him, and Job presents three faces to it, three things he pleads for. One, he pleads for sympathy. He's not getting sympathy from his friends. Matter of fact, they're accusing him of being wrong. They're telling him he's sinned. They're telling him it's his fault that his children died. They're telling him it's his fault that all these, and so they're not giving him any grace. They're not giving him the benefit of doubt. They're just so sure they're right. They're telling their good friend, supposedly, not much of a friend, but they're telling him, you're wrong. So he's pleading for sympathy. Let's look at 16:1. I'll read a little bit. Then Job replied, I've heard many things like these. Miserable comforters are you all. We need to remember that line. We might want to use it on somebody. Will your long-winded speeches never end? What ails you that you keep on arguing? I could speak like you if you were in my place. I could make fine speeches against you and shake my head at you, but my mouth would encourage you. Comfort from my lips would bring you relief. That's what you expect from a friend. Some sympathy, some help, some understanding. And then he goes on to a plea for justice. Yet if I speak, my pain is not relieved, and if I refrain, it does not go away. Surely, O God, you have worn me out. You have devastated my entire household. You have bound me, and it has become a witness. My gauntness rises up, testifies against me. God assails me and tears me in his anger and gnashes his teeth at me. My opponent fastens on me with piercing eyes, and he goes on. He does attribute this to God because he has this understanding, this belief that all things come from God, good and bad, the just and the unjust. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. We read in New Testament. And so in this way, Job is asserting his confidence in God's sovereignty. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't think he deserves it, but he is showing his faith that God is sovereign. God is the supreme one. And so he starts pleading for justice. And he goes on with that. Then finally, he has a plea for death. He says, I just wish I could go ahead and die. O earth, do not cover my blood. May my cry never be laid to rest. Even now my witness is in heaven. My advocate is on high. My intercessor is my friend. As my eyes pour out tears to God on behalf of a man, he pleads with God as a man pleads for his friend. Before that is when he had kind of pleaded for death, and he'd done that before. He said, it's better if I'd never been born, if I'd never experienced this. And we made the point that, yes, if he'd never been born, he wouldn't have gone through this trauma, this tragedy, but he'd also never known the goodness of God. See, up until this time, he was immensely blessed by God. God was pouring out his blessings on him. And if he had never been born, he wouldn't have experienced God's goodness. So yes, he's getting both sides of this. We know the reason. He doesn't. And he's pleading his case before God. Wanting sympathy, wanting justice. He's wanting, really, he said it before, his time in court. He wants more of a trial. He feels like he's been unjustly charged with trouble here. And he's wanting to kind of go to court with God and let God prove his fault. Kind of a bold thing to do. We're going to go on and break some of these down. A plea for sympathy. He didn't, his friends pleading for sympathy from them, they didn't identify with his situation. They didn't feel his pain. They didn't feel his agony. And they didn't understand his perplexity. They were convinced in their minds and their perception again that there was only one answer for his trouble, and that's that he had sinned. And there is a place for that. We know that sin does bring trouble, does bring consequences, does bring penalty. But what we're learning here from this book of Job is that's not the only reason trouble comes. And that you can live a righteous life before God, and trouble will come your way. As long as we're here on earth, trouble will come. And Jesus said that. As long as you're here, there will be trouble. Jesus tells us in the end times, we're going to see trouble like it's never been seen on the earth. That kind of scares me a little bit. We've seen some trouble on earth. We've seen some horrible wars. Jesus said, you're going to see worse than that. I hope he takes us home before that, but that's what he's teaching. And so he pleads for this sympathy. He pleads for his friends to try to understand, to give them a chance. And then he does on that plea for justice, that he's been denied a fair trial. And, that's supposed to be a pinnacle of our justice system, is everybody deserves a fair trial on a jury of their peers that will weigh the situation. And when we don't get that trial, we feel we've been unjustly charged, unjustly convicted. He says, I have no advocate to represent him. I don't have a lawyer. I don't have a friend standing next to me. And he pleads for someone to come to his defense. And in that light, when we come up to New Testament times, to the time after Jesus came, we have that sure promise that we have an advocate through Jesus Christ our Lord. And right now he sits at the right hand on the throne of the Father, interceding on our behalf. So now that we believed in Jesus Christ as our Savior, those of us who have, he is at the right hand of the Father. And when we go astray, when things go wrong, they'll say, yes, Father, they sinned, but he's one of ours. And then when we confess and repent that, we're cleansed of that. We have an advocate pleading our case, and that's what Job is asking for here. He feels like he's been thrown to the wolves, and no one is standing up for him. So he's desiring that. And then finally, plea for death. He felt death was near. I can understand. He had these sores all over him. Been going on for a long time. He feeling like I can't last much longer. Job's spirit was broken. He as he goes along, he is finding it harder and harder not to stay true to his beliefs, but to stand up for himself. And as we are constantly under attack, as we are constantly challenged, our spirit gets broken, and it's easy for us just to give up and lose our fight. Job has lost his fight, that ability to argue his point, because he was just being relentlessly, they were coming against him. But through all this, Job did not contemplate, did not propose, did not think about committing suicide. His life was in the Lord's hands. He asked God to take his life. God is that arbiter. God gives life, God takes away, and Job knew that. So he did not take that out. And it's so sad today as you look at statistics, as you read the news, perhaps even around you, perhaps your family has been touched by the case of suicide. We hear in the news, I forget the numbers, but just it's horrible how many of our military people take their lives every year, just for reasons we can't understand. But they're thinking that's the way out, is to take their life and to ease the pain. That's how bad they're hurting. And we should not be judgmental towards that. We're not in their shoes. We don't know what they've gone through. So we don't approve of it. We don't justify it, but we shouldn't condemn it either, because we just don't know. And they needed someone to come be an advocate for them, to encourage them, to help them. And so these are the arguments Job is putting forth to Eliphaz, his arguments. Then we go on to Bildad. Bildad is the other one, and he's a little harsher. And Bildad comes up with these terrors of death. That's how he tries to kind of scare Job into confessing. He talks about the things that happen when we don't serve God. This is in chapters 18 and 19. And he's trying to, he's repeating himself. They only have one argument. They're a broken record. But they're trying to, again, defend their terms. They don't want Job to be right. See, they're convinced that by living righteously, they're not going to be in trouble. Well, if Job's right, who lived righteous and had all this trouble, that means they could find trouble. They don't want to believe that, so they're denying what they're seeing in front of them for their own skin. That's part of it here. Let's go look at 18:1. When will you end these speeches? Be sensible, and then we can talk. Why are we regarded as cattle and considered stupid in your sight? You who tear yourself to pieces in your anger, is the earth to be abandoned for your sake, or must the rocks be moved from their place? Again, he's attacking the man here. Who said you're so good? Who said you're the wise one? The lamp of the wicked is snuffed out. The flame of his fire stops burning. The light in his tent becomes dark. The lamp beside him goes out. And so he's talking about how wickedness brings trouble. Wickedness brings death. And then he goes on down in, starting at verse 7. He relates trouble to being a traveler. The vigor of his step is weakened. His own schemes throw him out. His feet thrust him into a net. He wanders into its mesh. A trap seizes him by the heel. A snare holds him fast. A noose is hidden for him on the ground. A trap lies in his path. Terror startles him on every side. Again, he's saying, when you live a life of wickedness, trouble comes your way. Then in section 3, a criminal pursued. Verse 11, as the terror startles him on every side, a dog is every step. Calamity is hungry for him. Disaster is ready for him when he falls. He's going on that a criminal is pursued and has trouble. And then finally, he relates it to like a tree, starting in verse 16, talking about the wicked man. His roots dry up below, and his branches wither above. The memory of him perishes from the earth. He has no name in the land. He is driven from light into darkness and is banished from the world. And so he goes on. These are things that happen to the wicked. He dies for his sin. He's trapped by different things to where his life is not good. He's pursued like a criminal. And then he just kind of withers up and dies. Well, is that your appraisal of people in this world? Do you know anybody who you know does not live a good life, they live a wicked life, they manipulate people, they take advantage of? And we all do. And we see them succeeding. They have the big houses, they have the riches, they're welcomed by society. You think about this Epstein guy with all that trouble. And he was welcomed by all the glitterati. And now they're scattering. They're trying not to be associated with him. But he was a prince to him. He was a king. And so we see that. King David said it. Why did the righteous perish and the wicked succeed? David saw that in his life. And so Job comes back standing up for some of these things in chapter 19. He starts out talking about their insults. And he, in 19:1 through 4, he replies back to his friends, how long will you torment me and crush me with your words? 10 times now you have reproached me. Shamelessly you attack me. If it is true I've gone astray, my error is my concern, he says. If indeed you would exalt yourselves above me and use my humiliation against me, then know that God has wronged me and drawn his net around me. And so again, he's ascribing these troubles to God. He believes all things come from God, but we have other references of his that he doesn't curse God. He's just saying, I've been wrongly charged, and why are you insulting me? And this just brings out the point that our words have that power to hurt or heal others. We can think we're helping. We can think we're trying to say the right thing, and we can actually be hurting them. I shared last week that when we have a friend, a family member that has been knocked down, and maybe it is because of something they've done, what we need at that moment is we need to heal the hurt. We need to come alongside them, support them, not by condoning what they did, but just letting them know we care about them, we love them, we're there to help them. Once they get helped out of the hurt, then we can start talking about correction. But you don't go in to somebody who's beat down, who's broken, and tell them how awful, how bad they are. That's not going to get anywhere. What they'll do is they'll turn you off, just like a switch. They're not going to listen. So our words can hurt or heal. Our words can relieve the burden, or we can help bear the burden. Our words can crush or edify, and I wanted to use that word edify specifically because it relates to a building, an edifice. We're talking about building up. That's what edifying is. So we can say things that tear a person down to help destroy them, make them feel worse about themselves, or we can edify them. We can build them up through encouragement. We can recognize the good attributes in them. We can recognize some things like that and help them. Our words can demean. We can be mean and talk about somebody. We can make them feel lower in the worm's belly. Or we can build them up. We can amplify and help them feel good about themselves where they can. Not saying that we're overlooking wrong, but we just approach it, we address it at the correct time. So then we go on, and Job starts talking about illustrations. Bildad gave a bunch of illustrations about how people, the wicked, are trapped. Job turns that around and talks about an animal is trapped, a criminal in court, a traveler feels fenced in. In other words, there's nowhere to go. Sometimes we feel like that in life. Every way we turn, we're just blocked. A king becomes dethroned. A structure is destroyed. A tree is uprooted. A city besieged. Let's look at some of these in chapter 19. We'll look at, starting there at the beginning. When he says, how long will you, let's go down to 7. Though I cried, I've been wrong, I get no response. Though I cry for help, there is no justice. He has blocked my way, I'm fenced in, so I cannot pass. He has shrouded my paths in darkness, so now I can't see. He has stripped me of honor, king dethroned, and removed the crown from my head. These are the things that he's illustrating that he's gone through. Again, trying to get his friends to understand his pain, understand where he is, to give some understanding. And then he goes on to the next step, isolation, that he's been avoided by people. And we know that. A lot of time people are suffering. We might be there for a while for them, but typically we avoid that. We'll quit being around, we'll quit calling, we'll quit being there. And so they become isolated. We tend to withdraw. The person suffering tends to withdraw because when they get into a group, they feel attacked. They feel people are looking down on them, feel that people are saying they're a bad person. So why would you want to be in the middle of that? You don't. You withdraw. That isolates you even more, which is not healthy. You feel alienated and alone. Job is describing these are the emotions he's going through. And then he goes into insights there at the end of the chapter. Talks about peaks and valleys. There are high times in our life. There are great times in our life when we have, but there are also valleys in our life. And when we look at life correctly, we'll understand growth usually happens in the valley. I've been out west. I've been up to Pikes Peak. It's beautiful up there, but there's nothing growing up there. You get above that timberline, it's rock, it's snow. There's a beauty in that, but there's not the beauty of the foliage. So when you get down there where the river flows, get down in that valley, then you start seeing the lush trees, the lush grass. Growth happens in the valley. It's kind of where we exalt in the mountaintops, but growth happens in those valleys. That challenge happens when we're in the valleys, and they come to that. Looking at 23 through 29. Oh, that my words were recorded, that they were written on a scroll, that they were inscribed with an iron tool on lead, or engraved in rock forever. I know that my Redeemer lives. There's that assertion, okay? And that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. So with all this happening to him, he has that faith that my Redeemer liveth, and I'm going to see him one day. Those are the insights he has through all of this. And he believes, he has that confident affirmation about God being there for him. He has that ultimate vindication that it may be after death, but he's going to be vindicated that he wasn't wrong, that he was right. And then he gives that experiential warning. If you say, how we will hound him, since the root of the trouble lies in him, you should fear the sword yourselves. For wrath will bring punishment by the sword, and then you will know that there is justice. I want to move on quickly so we can get on to the last person, Zophar. Zophar, there's not as much to go through. It all depends on your point of view, and Zophar, the proposed faults of the wicked. And this is, Zophar is considered the youngest one of these three friends, and he makes some rash statements. And here, again, we can read and just know that Zophar has kind of missed it. He goes on and he says, my troubled thoughts prompt me to answer because I'm greatly disturbed. I hear a rebuke that dishonors me, and my understanding inspires me to reply. Surely you know how it's been from old, ever since man was placed on the earth, that the mirth of the wicked is brief, mirth. The joy of the godless lasts but a moment, though his pride reaches to the heavens, and his head touches the clouds, he will perish forever, like his own dung. What Zophar is saying here is the wicked die. They're killed. They receive judgment, that their pleasure is only temporary, that it doesn't last, and they face a painful death. Well, again, we have seen life. We've seen people that we know didn't do right, but they prosper, they succeed. And for some reason, in God's wisdom and what God does, he doesn't bring immediate punishment. It does come eventually. Sometimes it only comes after death. Sometimes we only reap our reward after death. That's how God works sometimes. The faithful will stay true to the end. Paul talked about the life we will get as we persevere and to the end of the race, that we have won the race, we have run well. Adrian Rogers had a neat little saying about this. Faith that falters before the finish was faulty from the start. And so he's just talking about that faith needs to stay through. Well, Job goes on, in closing this out, in chapter 20 and 21. Job retorts and says, so far you're off your rocker. You don't have this right at all. Job 20, listen carefully to my words. Let this be the consolation you give me. Bear with me while I speak. So pay attention. Is my complaint directed to man? Why should I not be impatient? Look at me and be astonished. Clap your hand over your mouth. When I think about this, I'm terrified. Trembling seizes my body. Why do the wicked live on? You might have said that. You see some of these horrible people out there. Why doesn't God just take them? Okay? We wonder about that. When we see good people suffering, why do the wicked live on? Why do they grow old and increase in power? We see this. They see their children established around them, their offspring before their eyes. Their homes are safe and free from fear. The rod of God is not on them. Their bulls never fail to breed. Their cows calves and do not miscarry. In other words, they're a success. Good things happen for them. They're making it. And then he goes on in 17. Let's jump down to 17. Yet how often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out? How often does calamity come upon them? The fate of God allots in his anger. How often are they like straw before the wind, like chaff swept away by the gale? It is said, God stores up man's punishment for his sons. Let him repay the man himself, that he will know it. Let his own eyes see his destruction. Let him drink the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about the family he leaves behind when its allotted months come to an end? But, you can put in there, can anyone teach knowledge to God, since he judges even the highest? One man dies in full vigor, complete, secure, and at ease, his body well nourished, his bones rich in marrow. Another man dies with bitterness of soul, never having enjoyed anything good. Side by side they lie in the dust, and worms cover them both. It's interesting as you read. You'll hear them interviewing one person who's lived to 100, and they'll tell you they attribute their long life to having a cigar and whiskey every day. I've heard some of those. But then we know so many that die of lung cancer at a young age. There doesn't seem to be any reason to it. But we do know there are people that live a self-indulged life for a long, long time. They last a long time. And there are some good ones that live a long, long time. There's not much rationality to it. So the wicked do often live a long life. They often live a good life. And in the end, we all die from something. For it's appointed unto man once to die. But then what does the Bible say? And after that is the judgment. And so we don't live being rewarded by God should not be why we live a good life. We live a good life out of love for Him. We understand how He has redeemed our soul from the pit of hell, how He has kept us and protected us and blesses us and secures us. And we know that one day that we have that sure hope of resurrection, that fulfillment one day. And so we live for those reasons, because of trust in Him, because of belief in Him, because of knowing life with Him that's better, not because He gives us a new car this month, He gives us a big house next month. That's living for works, that's living for the wrong reasons, and we can do that in our religiousness. We think by being religious, we're earning points with God. We kind of treat God like a genie, that if we rub that lamp right, He pours out good things. And you know what happens when we do that? That means we are in control of God. By what we do, we make Him do a certain thing. That isn't the way it is, folks. He's sovereign. He works in our life. As we live a righteous life, we have that promise that He will give us that abundant life. But God always, through His Word, and where we get off track, and it's natural as humans, but we always think of rewards and benefit in the temporal, in the right now. That's where we live, understandably. But if we understood all of this about God, all of our spirit, we're just a breath, we're just a vapor here. This time in life is just a short time. We can live 100 years. We're going to have a funeral here real soon for a great woman of our church that passed away just a little before her 100th birthday. People love her to death. We're going to celebrate that because she's with the Lord now. She lived 100 years. But that 100 years is just a wisp in the wind. Now she's going to be with the Lord forever and ever and ever. She put her coins, she put her eggs in that basket. Jesus said, don't lay up for yourselves treasures here on earth where moth and rust destroy. Lay up treasures in heaven where the thief does not steal, where rust does not come in. And so that's that long-term view. And you do that, people are going to laugh at you, but the God's going to embrace you. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.